In this episode, we're going to take something that often feels like a soft topic and treat it the way OT needs it treated, as a practical capability that can reduce real risk without slowing work to a crawl. Training and awareness in operational technology is not about turning every operator into a security analyst, and it is definitely not about dumping a pile of new rules on people who are already responsible for safe and reliable operations. The goal is competence, meaning people know what safe behavior looks like, what risky behavior looks like, and what to do when something feels off, all without creating confusion or fear. If you are brand new to cybersecurity, you might assume training means memorizing terms, passing quizzes, or watching videos that feel disconnected from real life. In OT, good training is more like learning how to drive a vehicle safely in different conditions, because the environment changes and the stakes are real. Done well, it makes people calmer and more confident, not more anxious, and it helps security become part of normal work instead of a surprise that arrives during a crisis. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. The first idea to understand is that OT teams are not one uniform audience, even if they work in the same facility. An operator running a process, a maintenance technician, an instrument engineer, a control systems engineer, and a site manager all touch the system differently and face different types of decisions. If you teach everyone the same content at the same depth, you will either bore people who need only the basics or overwhelm people who need focused guidance. A better approach is to match learning to job realities, which means thinking about what each role sees, what each role can change, and what each role is responsible for when something goes wrong. This is also where the phrase awareness can become misleading, because awareness alone is just knowing that threats exist, while competence is knowing how to respond in a specific situation. OT training should aim for the moments that matter, like recognizing unusual behavior on a workstation, handling a vendor request for access, or reacting to a process upset that might have a cyber cause. When learners can picture their own tasks while listening, training becomes useful instead of abstract. A helpful way to keep training grounded is to define the security outcomes you want in plain language before you choose any content. For OT teams, the most valuable outcomes are often behavioral, not technical, such as reporting anomalies quickly, resisting unsafe shortcuts, and following change control even when the work is urgent. You also want teams to understand why security is being asked for, because people comply more reliably when they know the purpose is to protect operations and safety, not to satisfy a distant checkbox. Beginners sometimes imagine that security is a separate job that arrives after the real work. But in OT, security needs to support the real work by reducing the chance that systems behave unpredictably. That is why training should include a simple mental model of how OT incidents happen, such as a chain of events where an access path is abused, a critical system is altered, and a small change triggers a large effect. When people understand the chain, they can spot weak links and act sooner. The outcome you want is not panic, but a steady habit of noticing and responding in a disciplined way. It is also important to recognize what makes OT training uniquely sensitive compared to typical office training. In many business environments, a training module can tell you to patch quickly, reboot often, or block unknown devices, and those are usually safe recommendations. In OT, some of those actions might be unsafe, impractical, or controlled by vendor requirements and maintenance schedules. If you teach generic advice without OT context, you can unintentionally encourage behavior that disrupts operations or violates safety procedures. That is one reason OT learners can become skeptical of security training, because they have experienced advice that does not fit their world. Building trust means explicitly acknowledging that OT has constraints, and that security practices must be adapted to protect availability and safety. It also means emphasizing escalation pathways, like knowing when to involve control engineers, when to involve safety staff, and when to involve security, rather than telling individuals to take independent technical actions. Competence in OT often looks like knowing your boundaries and knowing who to call, not trying to be a hero with a quick fix. To avoid chaos, training should be layered, starting with a common baseline and then adding role-specific depth. The baseline is the shared language and shared expectations that everyone needs, such as what suspicious behavior looks like, why removable media can be risky, why credential sharing is dangerous, and why undocumented changes cause both operational and security problems. This baseline should also explain the difference between IT and OT priorities in a respectful way, because learners need to understand why security teams might ask for certain controls and why operations teams might push back. After the baseline, role-focused learning can address the specific decisions and workflows each group owns, like how operators should report anomalies during a shift, how maintenance staff should handle vendor-supplied laptops, or how engineers should approach configuration changes. Layering prevents overload because learners are not forced to digest details that do not apply to them. It also makes the program fair because it recognizes that different roles carry different risks and different authority. When training respects the learner's job, the learner is more likely to respect the training. One of the most practical training themes for OT teams is recognizing anomalies without assuming they are cyber right away. OT environments have equipment faults, process variations, and normal quirks, so it is easy to dismiss weird behavior as just another glitch. At the same time, many cyber events in OT first appear as small anomalies, such as a workstation behaving strangely, a controller rebooting unexpectedly, or a remote session appearing at an unusual time. Training should teach people to notice patterns, like repeated issues that do not match known failure modes, or changes that occur after access events, or alarms that appear in clusters in a way that seems coordinated. The goal is not to turn people into investigators, but to build a habit of capturing a few key observations and reporting them promptly. For beginners, it helps to think of this like noticing an unusual smell in a building, where you do not need to know whether it is electrical, chemical, or mechanical to know it should be reported. In OT, early reporting can be the difference between a contained event and a widespread disruption. Another high-impact topic is identity and access behavior, because humans are often the gatekeepers, even in highly automated systems. OT teams frequently interact with vendors, integrators, and internal specialists who need access for troubleshooting, upgrades, or maintenance. Training should clarify what good access looks like, such as access that is time-limited, approved, tied to a specific purpose, and monitored, rather than indefinite access that becomes invisible over time. It should also address social engineering in a way that feels realistic, not sensational, because attackers often exploit urgency, authority, and helpfulness. A common risky pattern is a request that arrives during a busy moment, like a vendor saying they need immediate access or production will suffer, which pressures staff to bypass normal steps. Competence here is knowing that urgency is exactly when you slow down and follow the process, because emergencies are when shortcuts create the largest risk. It is also knowing how to verify identity through trusted channels, rather than trusting a caller, an email, or a message just because it sounds confident. When you teach access behavior, you are really teaching safe decision-making under pressure. Change control is another area where training can either reduce chaos or accidentally create it. In OT, changes can be risky because systems are tightly tuned, and even small configuration differences can affect process behavior. Security improvements often involve changes, such as adjusting network boundaries, modifying authentication, or hardening configurations, so the training message should be that disciplined change control protects everyone, including security. Beginners sometimes imagine that security wants to move fast and lock things down. But in OT, the best security outcomes come from controlled, well-communicated changes that are tested and coordinated. Training should reinforce the idea that undocumented changes are a major source of both operational failures and security exposure, because if nobody can confidently explain what changed, nobody can confidently restore it. It should also emphasize that emergency changes still need documentation and review after the fact, because otherwise the environment drifts into a fragile state. When OT teams understand that change control is a safety practice as much as a governance practice, they are more likely to treat it as non-negotiable. The calm, predictable rhythm of change reduces both cyber risk and operational stress. Removable media and portable equipment deserve special attention because they are common in OT environments and can be a quiet pathway for trouble. OT teams might use portable drives to move logs, load updates, or transfer configuration files, and vendors might arrive with laptops used across multiple sites. Training should not simply say do not use these items, because OT work often requires them, but it should teach safe handling patterns. That includes understanding why unknown media is risky, why scanning and controlled transfer processes matter, and why plugging a device into a sensitive system is a decision with consequences. It also includes encouraging a culture where people feel comfortable asking, where did this device come from and has it been approved, rather than feeling awkward or obstructive. For a beginner, it helps to compare this to food safety, where you might not be able to eliminate risk entirely, but you can greatly reduce it by following careful handling steps and using trusted sources. The goal is not to slow work, but to prevent a convenient shortcut from becoming the starting point of a larger incident. In OT, small habits around media can have outsized impact on resilience. A training program also needs to handle incident response expectations in a way that helps rather than scares people. OT incidents can be high stakes, and fear-based training often backfires because people either tune out or become hesitant to report problems. Instead, training should normalize reporting and make it clear that early reporting is valued, even if the issue turns out to be harmless. Learners should know what to report, who to contact, what information is useful, and what they should avoid doing, such as attempting risky fixes or deleting evidence out of embarrassment. A simple, calm message is that you are not expected to diagnose. You are expected to notice and escalate. Training should also clarify that cyber response in OT must be coordinated with operations and safety, because the safest technical response is not always the safest operational response. For example, disconnecting a system might prevent spread, but could also disrupt control, so decisions need the right people in the loop. Competence here is understanding that response is a team activity, and your role is to provide timely observations and follow safe procedures. When people know their part, they act faster and with less confusion. To keep training from becoming chaos, you also need to think about how learning is delivered and reinforced over time. One-time training that floods people with information often creates short-term compliance and long-term forgetting. A steadier approach uses small, repeatable learning moments that connect to real work, like brief reminders before scheduled maintenance, short scenario discussions during shift meetings, or targeted refreshers after relevant changes. Reinforcement matters because security behavior is a habit, and habits form through repetition and feedback, not through a single long session. This is also where leadership behavior becomes a form of training, because if supervisors routinely bypass access controls or ignore reporting pathways, the team learns that the rules are optional. A healthy program aligns messages across security, engineering, and operations so learners do not hear conflicting instructions. It also creates a safe space for questions, because confusion is a risk factor and unasked questions turn into improvisation during stressful moments. When learning is paced and integrated, competence grows without overwhelming the organization. Another crucial element is measuring training effectiveness in ways that reflect competence, not just completion. Counting how many people completed training modules tells you who clicked through content, but it does not tell you whether behavior changed. In OT, you want indicators like increased reporting of anomalies, improved consistency in following remote access procedures, fewer incidents caused by unsafe shortcuts, and faster, calmer coordination during disruptive events. You can also measure whether people understand the escalation path by checking whether reports include the right details, like time, system name, symptoms, and recent access activity. This is not about punishing mistakes, but about seeing where confusion remains and where training needs adjustment. Beginners should understand that measurement is a feedback loop, not a scorecard, and the purpose is to make the environment safer and more predictable. If measurement turns into blame, people will hide problems, and that is the opposite of competence. The signal you want is openness and steady improvement, not perfect statistics. Finally, a good OT training and awareness program respects the culture and priorities of the environment while gently shaping it towards safer behavior. OT teams typically value reliability, safety, and practical results, so the most persuasive training connects security to those values instead of treating it as an external demand. It also acknowledges that people are busy and that procedures must fit into real workflows, because unrealistic policies create workarounds, and workarounds create blind spots. Competence without chaos means people can explain the basics of why certain rules exist, recognize common risk patterns, and respond confidently when something unusual happens, all while keeping operations stable. Over time, you want security language to become normal, like talking about safe access, trusted changes, and controlled transfers the way teams already talk about lockout procedures or maintenance planning. When that happens, you can see the real win. Fewer surprises, faster recovery, and a shared sense that security supports the mission rather than competing with it. That is what purposeful training looks like in OT, and it is one of the most durable protections you can build.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit BareMetalCyber.com.